Everyone wants to know this about writers. What is your inspiration? What put you up to it? They're never satisfied with such explanations as because it was there or I don't know what came over me. They want specifics. What are your specifics?
I don't know. I don't know what came over me. Well, it's different for everything I write. So I told you the story of the murdering a person on a boat in the Arctic. And that came out of a conversation we were having. So each story would come from a different place. For instance, Elfenland, the one where the woman is writing this fantasy series, I probably wouldn't have been thinking about that if I hadn't gone to Comic-Con. Do you know what Comic-Con is? All right. You know, don't you? Yes. All right. So Comic-Cons have proliferated. So the big one is in San Diego, and people dress up like comic book characters or other entities that you might find online or in movies. And they make their own costumes. They consider it a point of honor to do that. And they will put a lot of work into it. And they turn up at these conventions, and I'm not sure what they do there, but they do all sorts of convention things. And I have my picture taken with a number of them, and I don't even know what they are. But some of them were the steampunkers. We know what they look like. And then I went to Las Vegas, and there's a lot of them there too, in different outfits. And you could get your picture taken with them as well. And then I went to Leipzig, where they have a book fair. And lo and behold, it was the costume day. The place was crawling with these, really large German people dressed as blue fairies and other things with horns on their heads. And I really had no idea what they were, but they were having, I think you get a prize for best costume, but you also get a prize for best picture of a person in a costume. So there was a lot of posing going on and picture taking. It's a cult, and it's very well understood by the people in it. And there's a special sub-branch for people who are fans of manga. Manga being the Japanese comics.
I know what it is.
So they will do quite a lot of that kind of thing. But it was very inspirational to me.
Yeah.
And I met some fascinating people there who were making the first Iranian Western vampire movie, which they have now made. It's become quite a cult movie. It's called A Girl Walks Home Alone at Night. So you have the pleasure of seeing a girl in a chador doing vampiristic things to unpleasant men.
So all of this to avoid talking about your childhood then?
Oh, my childhood. What would you like to talk about?
I mean, there are some specifics when it comes to your childhood.
Oh yes, yeah, but they're not necessarily inspirational. Do you see what I mean? You can have anything happen to you in your life, but that's not necessarily where a story comes from. However, my ability to read and my addiction to it are undoubtedly connected to my childhood, because there was nothing else to do when it was raining. So it rained, we were in the woods, no electricity, no TV, no school, no library, no theater, no movies, none of the above, no ballet. Think of it, there wasn't any. And there were, however, books and reading materials, so I got into that quite early and read everything, and I still read all sorts of things. So the reading material ranged from the usual children's books to scary detective stories with dead blondes on the cover to scientific textbooks and everything in between. So lots of reading for sure. And the other thing you could do when it was raining was writing and drawing. So we used to draw comic books, and we used to make little books. You sewed them up the side, You made the book, you folded the pages, you put the cover on, you sewed them up, sewed up the side, then you had a book, and then you could decide what to put in it. So I think with a lot of kids, the form comes first, and then you realize you have to have some content.
But it is fair to say that you grew up in an environment where some of the topics that you've been faithful
Absolutely,
to
yes, certainly. Lucky me, I know what biologists are somewhat like some of the time. So novelists, if you take novels as a whole, the numbers of them in which scientists appear are probably quite small. And the numbers of them in which scientists appear and are not Dr. Frankenstein or some other mad genius are smaller still. So the biologists actually like it that there's some of them in the books and that they have conversations of the type that they might well have.
What is well, I when I started reading The Handmaid's Tale, this is just a small little fun thing, but in a very sad book, of course. But the doctor and the nurse, they are sitting by their computers writing a lot. And by 1985, I'm not sure if the doctors and the nurses did that. So that was kind of a prophecy, maybe.
It was on the scene. There were computers. They didn't deploy in a really accessible way for lots of people until about 1989, 1990. We got the first Apple home computers with the floppy disks that you put in, the little screen about that big. But computers had existed for some time. They just weren't in the form that they are now.
Okay, so that was an attempt, at least, to get over to the book called The Handmaid's Tale. I just wanted to ask you about it because you, by the end of this book, In Other Worlds, you have included an open letter from Margaret Atwood to the Johnson Independent School District.
Yes.
One of the places who challenged this book called The Handmaid's Tale, based on its giving Christianity a bad reputation and sexual.
I don't know why people think it's Christianity. Christianity is hardly in it at all. But let's say the kind of religion that sometimes passes itself off as Christianity, which is a different thing.
But how do you experience the resonation of this book in the world today?
Okay, so when it first appeared in 1985-6, it was published in England and Canada and the United States. And the reactions to it were different in each of those countries. The English had their religious civil war in the 17th century, and they don't intend to have another one anytime soon. So they said, jolly good yarn. What an imagination. Margaret, you certainly are a caution. The Canadians, in their nervous way, said what they usually say, which is in the form of a question. The question was, could it happen here? And my reassuring answer to them was, probably not, because Quebec wouldn't stand for it. Quebec would prevent it. Whereas in the United States, they said, how long have we got? And when I went out to the West Coast to do the promo on it, somebody had spray painted it all along the seawall in Venice, California. The Handmaid's Tale is already here. And that was in 1985. So part of the kickoff for writing the book was that I do believe that if people of an extremist kind make statements about what they would do if they had the chance, if they do have the chance, they probably will do it. And people were making statements of this kind quite a lot in what was then called the right-wing fringe and has now moved into the center of the Republican Party as the Tea Party. And one of the reasons that the Republicans did not win the presidency in in the last election was that the 4 wise Republicans opened their mouths and actually said what they were thinking. And that alarmed a lot of women, I can tell you that. So they didn't win it on the presidential election then, but state by state they're implementing some very similar policies.
Have you reread The Handmaid's Tale yourself?
Of necessity, because we're doing a graphic novel of it. So of course I've revisited it to see how that should be.
So it's 30 years this year.
Yeah.
How did you feel about it then when you reread it?
Well, how did I feel about it? In what way? The writing, the characterization, the story, how it comes out, my rationale for doing this or that.
All of that.
That's a big conversation. I can give you one little piece of inspiration since we're on that subject. The inspiration for doing the epilogue the way I did was George Orwell's 1984, which at that time I was alone in thinking that it wasn't as pessimistic a book as people thought it was, because there was an epilogue at the end of it about Newspeak, and that epilogue was written in standard English in the past tense. Newspeak was. So what may we assume? We must assume that the world of 1984 didn't last, and that someone in a future beyond it was writing about it as a past thing. So I put an epilogue at the end of that kind. That world didn't last. I'm so optimistic. And we were looking back at it and trying to recreate it. And that also allowed me to tell the reader a number of the things about that world and how it came into being that the central character couldn't know, because information was so tightly controlled.
I see. And the characters in Mad Adam don't know whether there are parallel groupings around the planet.
The characters in Mad Adam don't know how many people have survived because their communication system has gone down. And that would happen in our world as soon as the electricity goes off. So we are running our entire network of everything on cheap electricity. And that's one of the big problems that we are going to have to solve. And I think Elon Musk has now descended from on high in a balloon like the Wizard of Oz, and he's going to fix it all for us because he's invented the Tesla motor car, which is entirely solar powered now and has great acceleration. And he's invented superchargers, so it only takes 20 minutes with a supercharger to recharge your Tesla. You don't need any oil or gas. And he's now invented the home power pack. It's called the Power Wall. I understand that it's really not, its capacity is really not entirely sufficient yet. But I just remind you that when we first started with the cell phone, it was about this big. It was like a shoebox. It was called a satellite phone. It was very expensive, and everybody laughed at it.